Welcome to the premiere of this stream. I got a new co-host with me. I got Stine, my wife, with me. She was so interesting in the product that she demanded to be on the stream. No, I'm just kidding. Stine and I started the company together and we are starting to doing this stream together. And today we got PixieBrix with us. Hello, Todd.
Hey, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. And you?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for being here. And Todd is the founder of PixieBrix and he will show us some PixieBrix. Todd, what is PixieBrix?
Yeah, so PixieBrix is a tool that anyone can use to shape the websites they use to have the perfect user experience. So if the sites that you use have features that you don't use, you can hide them. If they have features that are missing, you can add those features. And so it really gives pretty much anyone the ability to really shape their tools to better fit their work.
Cool. And you promised us that you have some nice demo to show today.
Yeah, absolutely. We can take people through, we'll actually take people through a series of building different things that actually are examples of things that I use in my own personal life, and can also speak to some of the business use cases that we're seeing with PixieBrix. So today, if you want to follow along, what you can do is you can go to pixiebrix.com, and in the upper right, if you don't have the browser extension already, it will actually say start for free. You can click on that, and then it will ask you to either sign up with your Google account or Microsoft account, and then it will walk you through the flow of installing PixieBrix. And so PixieBrix is a browser extension, and so what that means is it can actually modify the look and feel of any site. So if you use, a lot of people use browser extensions like ad blockers or password managers or coupon clippers. So with PixieBrix, you can actually very quickly create any of that sort of functionality that you would get out of something that you would find in the Chrome Web Store, for instance. But you can make it your own.
Cool. And Todd, not that I think so, but if I'm having any problem here in the installation process, I heard that you have a very nice Slack group that we can get a lot of help for. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do I find that?
Yeah, so actually, I don't know if we have the Slack group on our homepage.
I'll post a link in the description and the comments afterwards so everyone can join the nice Slack group. I'm a part of that group too, and I get a lot of help there, so I can definitely recommend that to join the community.
And I'll point out some links to access that in the tool as well.
Cool, and just go ahead. Thank you.
Great. And so PixieBrix is free for individuals and small teams to use. And then the other thing I'll point out is that PixieBrix, the extension, is also open source. And so you can follow along. You can also submit feature requests. Use in your own project. I would encourage everyone to kind of star it or add notifications so that you can see when new releases are up and coming, or if you want to test things out early. And so let's actually go ahead and start building with PixieBrix. So when you install the extension, what you'll have is the ability to modify any page. And so this first use case I'll do is actually one that is pretty relevant since today is Valentine's Day. And so let's say, for instance, that...
are you kidding me? Is that today? Sorry, Stine.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's say you forgot to make a dinner reservation.
Yeah, I did.
You go make a reservation. So one of the sites that we have in the United States is OpenTable. And so what OpenTable is it's a way to make reservations on different restaurants. And so the problem with OpenTable, though, is that all their reviews are about like 5 stars, and so it's really hard to get a sense of what is actually sort of which are good restaurants, which might not be great restaurants. And so I always like to cross-reference the reviews or the restaurants that are on OpenTable with Yelp. And so that can actually get quite tedious, right? Because if I'm on OpenTable and I find this restaurant like Ilili, which is a fantastic Lebanese restaurant, then I have to kind of go to Yelp. Then I gotta like type in the name of the restaurant and I click through some things, find it, and then see what the reviews are. So you can see that the reviews are a little bit different here than what's on this website. And so with PixieBrix, what I can do actually is they have a reviews tab here, but those aren't the reviews that I want. I want the Yelp reviews. And so with PixieBrix, what I can actually do is I can swap out that reviews button for my own Yelp search button. And so what I'll do here is I'll open up the PixieBrix page editor. And so there's a couple ways to do that. One is to right-click and then press inspect. The other way to do that is to press F12 on your keyboard. And what that will do is that will open up the Chrome development tools. and the PixieBrix page editor is here under PixieBrix. And so if this is the first time that you are running PixieBrix on a site, it's going to prompt you to give permissions to PixieBrix to modify the site. I've already done that in this case. But now what I have is the ability to modify the site. So I can do things like add buttons to the page, context menus. So those are things that when you right-click, you can take different actions. We have a quick bar that can appear on any page. We have a sidebar panel that you can actually drop things onto, and we'll also cover that today. And then we also have triggers. Triggers are things that can respond to different events that happen on the page, such as an element becoming visible, the page loading, or other things like that. So in this case, though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button to OpenTable in order to run a Yelp search for the restaurant.
Cool. I'll just interrupt you briefly. 2 questions. How much does PixieBrix cost for me as a developer?
Yeah, so PixieBrix is free for individuals, and then it's actually free for small teams up to 5 people. And so it's a great way to build stuff for yourself. You can create small teams for yourself and friends or your company to start trying things out. And then once you get past 5 users, then we start charging $10 a user.
Cool. And the second thing is this something that we can build afterwards ourselves, the one you're showing us now?
Yep, all this one requires, I think OpenTable does require you to log in, but it's a free account. And then all the other ones that I'll show today don't actually require a login.
Nice, thank you, Todd.
Great. So in this case, what I'll do is I will click the button tool. And so you can see here that up above, I'm starting to see basically we put the page into button insertion mode. So what I can do is I can mouse over different things on the page. And then what I'll do is I'll give PixieBrix an example of a button. And so in this case, I'll click on this button. And you can see here what PixieBrix does is it adds another action to that menu. And so it's kind of fun what PixieBrix does. What it's doing is it's finding what is a good place or where is the menu on the page. And then it's also figuring out kind of what is the structure of a button on the page. And so in this case, I want to do a Yelp search. And so I can change the caption to Yelp. And then maybe I want to kind of just add an icon in here. And so down below is the kind of structure that PixieBrix inferred for that button. And then I can always go in and kind of add the caption there if I want to add a caption if it didn't find the caption. Or in this case, I just wanted to add an icon in here. And so now I'm able to, I see the icon up there. And then now I can always go and change this to Yelp. And so now I have a button on the page. When I have a button on the page, now what I want to do is typically I want to read or extract some data from the page and then perform an action with it. So in this case, what PixieBrix will do is it will give me some information automatically. So things like the page title, the description of the page, the URL. In this case, though, I also want to grab some more information like the name of the restaurant or maybe even let's grab the address. And so what I'll do is all the different actions and kind of components in PixieBrix, we call them bricks. And so here what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add a brick. And what comes up is our brick selection modal. PixieBrix comes pre-built in with a bunch of different actions. So things like, if you're familiar with selectors, like reading data from the page using jQuery selectors. We can do things like set input values on the page, open up a tab. We have great integrations with service like Zapier, with UiPath, with Automation Anywhere, which your viewers probably use, as well as things like Google Sheets. So in this case, though, first.
So Todd, what you're telling me here is that I can start a bot, an API robot like with Automation Anywhere or UiPath with PixieBrix.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I had some sort of automation that might work on restaurants, I could actually use PixieBrix as a nice way to drop a button on the page to trigger that bot that might come back, or it might, maybe in a second, I'll show you kind of what information we can pull from this page automatically, and then send that off to a queue for something to handle later.
Cool.
So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our component reader brick. That what it does is, because we deploy as a browser extension, we can do fun things where PixieBrix can actually talk directly to whatever front-end framework the website happens to be built in. So in this case, OpenTable is built in React, and we can detect what version this was built in. And so if I click on the restaurant title, what PixieBrix does is it tries to guess what is a good selector for that title. So if you use UiPath or Automation Anywhere, you're probably familiar with selectors. They're just a way to kind of uniquely identify an element on a page. So in this case, this first one, it kind of looks like a set of characters. In this case, this website was built with a technology that randomizes what the CSS class names are each time, so that's not going to be a good selector. But this one looks pretty stable in terms of let's just grab kind of the header element on the page. And so when I look over here on the right, this right side of the page editor is what we call the data panel. It has things like what is the context that's available to this brick, so which variables are available at this step in the flow, as well as what is the output of the current brick. And then some bricks also provide a preview of what information is available. So in this case, if I click on preview, I can see all the different information that's flowing through for that particular element. And so some of these aren't even visible on the page, right? So in terms of RID is probably the restaurant ID. I get things like the restaurant name title, the restaurant name, the description, the price band, how many reservations have been made recently there, the restaurant hours, things like that, the neighborhood. And so in this case, let me grab the variable for the restaurant name.
So by saying that you're working a lot with selectors, do you think that a good RPA developer will make a good PixieBrix developer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've intentionally tried to make a lot of those skills transfer over in terms of the types of logic or the types of ways of describing things on the page that you would use with RPA. And so we see that there's a lot of great synergies between RPA and PixieBrix, where RPA, especially if you're doing unattended bots, it's all about kind of the pure unattended automation where there's no user in front of things. Where PixieBrix really shines is both attended automation, and we do have some automation features that will show like form fill, opening up a tab. But really where we shine is sort of that triggering a bot as well as showing the information that comes back from a bot. So either viewing the status of a queue or maybe once I've run a bot, actually showing what those results are.
Cool.
So in this case, what I'll do is I'll first grab the restaurant name. And so if I wanted to run a Yelp search, right? If I switch back over to this Yelp tab, I can kind of see how this website works when I run a search, right? There's sort of, when I run a search in the URL, there's going to be this fine description with the restaurant name, as well as like what is that location that's coming through. And so if I wanted to, I could actually manually put that together. So I could use our open up a tab brick, and I could take the first part of this URL for Yelp search. And so this isn't actually what I would do in practice, and I'll show you a quicker way in a second. But if you manually wanted to kind of instruct this, what I would do is I would take the base URL, and then I would take this part here, this fine description, and then I would take that restaurant name variable and paste that in there.
So you can add these parameters directly to the PixieBrix brick just by doing this thing.
Yep. Yeah. So each brick is going to have a series of inputs that you want to provide. So in this case, this is our open up a tab brick, which has the base URL and then also the URL parameters, which it will take care of the any of like the encoding special characters or spaces.
Cool. And the add sign in front of the data restaurant name, is that because it came from the previous brick?
Yep. So each brick has what we call an output key, which is just the variable name. And so we identify those with an @ sign in front of each one of those. And so this one, I could always change this one. So I could say, I could call this details, and then here I would change this to details instead of data.
Cool. Thank you.
And then, yep. And so that's the, and so the other thing to kind of note here is on each one of these, we have different ways to provide inputs. And so for the URL, I might want to pass in text, and this text is actually text templates. So I can actually insert some variables there, and I'll show that a little bit later, or I can pass a variable directly. Then same on these, I can either pass text, a number, Boolean value, I can exclude it. In this case, I'm going to pass the variable for this one, and then I'll just hard code in the kind of New York, New York. So now when I click this button, what's going to happen is it's going to open up the Yelp page with that URL, and so that runs the search. And so that's great. So if I ever come across sites where I just kind of want to run a search on an arbitrary site, I can just kind of look at what does that search URL look like, then kind of just wire those things up myself. But the fun thing about PixieBrix is, and this is where PixieBrix gets its name, is that actually we have a lot of these bricks already pre-made, and then you can actually build your own reusable bricks for yourself as well as other people to make. So in this case, someone's already created a Yelp search brick in a new tab, and so I don't have to know what that URL shape looks like. And so what I can do is I can take the restaurant name and just plop that in directly, and then I can also take that location that I wanted to hard code and then plop that in. And so now I can do this, and so I don't have to figure out each time kind of what does a URL look like. And so because of that, that's super powerful, because let's say I wanted to also run kind of a Google search in a new tab, right? I could find our Google search brick, add it, and then maybe here I want to put the restaurant name. And then, as I mentioned, these are actually text templates. And so if I surround it with these double braces, which if you've used kind of Nunjucks or any marketing automation tools or anything, this is Postman, right? It's going to be pretty common around having those double braces. And then I could always type in some additional things that I wanted to hard code there. So maybe I want to search this for reviews, right? And so now when I click this button, it's actually going to open up two pages. It's going to open up that Yelp one, as well as the reviews page, or as well as the Google search for those reviews.
Cool. Todd, I promised the viewers that they could post their questions in the chat and you will answer them right away. We got a great one. Hey, Somali, thanks for joining. This is exciting. One question though, can PixieBrix help in data scraping?
And in data scraping?
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, it can. And actually, I think Orlando, who's doing a session tomorrow, is going to touch a lot more on that.
Cool.
So the couple ways so we're really focused on the data that's currently on the page. What we don't really have any support for is sort of automated processes that maybe you're going to run overnight that are going to like crawl every single page on a website. We don't support that. But if you're looking for things like getting the information off of the page for restaurant name or details or hours on a page that you're currently on, or as well as reading data from a table, I think Orlando is going to cover that tomorrow. We do have support for that. And so we're really focused on that interaction that the user is having on the page that they're currently on.
Great. And so Somali, make sure you join the session tomorrow with Orlando, same time. He will show you data scraping, and stick with this session because we will learn a lot. Thank you, Todd.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll also we'll touch on a little other data stuff as well in this one. And so kind of the other thing that I'll point out is a couple things. One is if you do have a question and you want to get help, we actually have a few different ways of getting help. So from the page editor, you can click on Ask a Question. We do have a community Slack, and so that's going to be the best and fastest way to get answers. We always have people from our team watching for posts in there, and then also some of our great community members will answer questions as well. We also have a forum, so if you want to write a longer post or if you want to show things off, that's a great place to do that. And then the other thing that we offer is you can just schedule a Zoom call directly with one of us from our team, and we'll actually do a deep dive into your use case and help build things.
Cool.
And so from here, the other way, the other thing I'll show off in here as well is from a given page, we also have, if you click on this View in Marketplace link, we also have our own public marketplace where each brick has a listing in here, and so a lot of these also have some very useful help text or videos that show how to use those bricks. And so if there's, that's a great place to look as well for any information or tips. And these will also link to, if there's any tutorials that include content on how to use that brick, that will also get linked to there as well. And
cool.
So once I have my brick, what I can do is I can save this. And now it's going to be available on any page on OpenTable for me to go to. And so if I switch over to a different restaurant, maybe do the Smith here. Now I see my Yelp button here, and I can click on that, right? And it's going to open up those two different searches for me. So that's pretty cool. This is one that I use back when dining was a thing. It's one that I used a lot. I guess it's coming back, so that's great. So this is a fun one, and I think I think the place where, if you're thinking about sort of business use cases for this sort of thing, one place where we see this come up a lot is actually jumping between different internal systems. So let's say you have like a ticketing system and a CRM, or maybe an internal portal. Often what we find is people like to add buttons to those pages that will take the current entity that you're looking at in one system and then jump over directly to a different entity in another system by either constructing a URL or running a search. And oftentimes what people combine that with as well is our ability to actually fill forms across different pages in the browser. So that maybe you can kind of jump over to a ticketing system and pre-fill a ticket, or maybe take some context from one page and then jump over to maybe one of your a different portal to enter in some information about a particular case if you're talking about contact center.
Cool.
So this is kind of a fun use case of a particular page. Yep.
For sure. And as promised, that there will be Todd promised me that there will be no stupid questions today. So just keep the questions coming in the chat. I'll see. We actually have a few, Todd. So Pavan Dev, hey, and welcome, Pavan, is asking, is PixieBrix a type of RPA tool like UiPath and Automation Anywhere?
You can use us for attended RPA. I think we actually have partnerships with the different vendors. So we're actually a UiPath advanced technology partner, and then we're also an Automation Anywhere partner as well. And then we have integrations with those built in. And so I think in a later episodes, we'll actually be showing off those integrations in terms of how quick it is to be able to trigger those bots. For UiPath, actually, we have different modalities of triggering the local bot on your own machine, triggering things off in a queue or through Orchestrator, as well as Automation Anywhere. We have integrations for both their bot running tool as well as their RE tool as well. And so you can really think of us as sort of the universal user interface to all of those other tools that you might be using for automation, or even things like Power BI, or if you have a data science team. There's sort of fun things that you can do by embedding like Streamlit or other applications into pages.
Cool, thank you, and thank you, Pavan, for the question. And please let the questions come. We will answer those, or Todd will answer those.
Great. And so this was an example of kind of placing a button on one page. Next, I'll show an example of kind of a use case that is actually relevant that you can run on any page. And so one thing that I'm actually doing is I'm actually moving from New York to Boston, and so I was doing an apartment search. And so as part of this, moving up there with my girlfriend, so we have different places that we work. I work from home, but she has to go into an office, and then there's also like distance from the gym and other things that I kind of want to consider as parts of things. And so kind of came up with this thing of, well, every time I come across an address, there's a bunch of information that I want to know about that address. And so here I'll just kind of, these are way out of my price range. New York can get quite expensive.
That looks nice though. There's both billiard and a poker table. And
yeah. I think that poker table is right there for you, Anders. still been playing, but so what we can do is, and I'll just kind of show this as an example, just because it doesn't have a login or anything. I'll open back up the PixieBrix page editor, but in this time, instead of placing a button on the page, what I'll actually do is I will use our context menu tool in order to create an action that I can run whenever I right-click on any address. And so what I'll do in this case is sort of a simple one of searching Google Maps for both the actual address as well as directions to some place that I'm interested in. So what's interesting about this one as well, so where this is going to appear, currently it appears everywhere, and so you can kind of see my search one here. In browsers, there's notions of different contexts. So right now it's set up to work in all contexts. I'm actually going to change this just to be the selection context. So now when I right click on a page, it doesn't have anything, but if I select this address, it's going to appear here. And so the other thing that I'll do for this context menu is this defaults to just the current site, but I'm actually going to say, well, this can actually work on any different site. It doesn't matter what site it is. And then context menus sort of have one other quirk to them where you can kind of set whether or not PixieBrix should have access to the page or whether or not PixieBrix gets access only when you trigger the action. In this case, I don't need any additional context from the page. I'm only using the address. So I'll just click none here. And so where this is going to work is, then the other thing I'll do is I'll add a placeholder here for showing kind of when I right click on this, what is the thing that I have selected that I'm going to run the action over. And so now what I have is I have a context menu that whenever I select some text, I can right click and then I get a kind of a search affordance here. And so what I'll do in this case, and I can see the data that's flowing through in this case, right? So a lot of it's the stock page data. The one I'm interested in here is this one called selection text, which is the content that I have selected. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a brick.
So you copied the property of the address or the text, up there.
Yeah, whenever I click this, I'm not copying the text itself. I'm just copying the variable name.
Cool.
So I don't have to think about kind of what is, in this case, it would be input dot selection text. But I'm pretty lazy, so I just always copy these. So next what I'll do is I'll do a search Google Maps. And here, right, we have one query that comes in there, so I'll just paste that in. So now if I want to give this a try, I'll right click and then I search for that location. And so if I want to like click over to Street View, it's pretty quick. And so I could save this, and now on any page actually, so like if I come back to the Smith, I guess they have an address here. Where is that?
I think it was further below.
Yeah, every time I want to click on it, it's moving. So now this is here. So if I want to do that, they already had Google Maps on that, but I can jump over here and see where that's at. So that's pretty cool. I think the other thing that was actually useful is sort of making it more personal to myself, and that's really like one of the big things with PixieBrix is how do you really make sites really personal for your particular use cases. And so one thing that you might want to do in when you're working with addresses is always have a quick way of finding kind of what is the route to that place by public transit or by car or whatever. So in this case, I'm going to add our Google Maps directions brick. And now this one has two addresses, right? It has the starting address and the destination address. And so what I'll do is I'll grab kind of the selection text as this kind of the destination address. And then maybe I'll go ahead and enter in, actually this would be my home address. And so then maybe the destination I would put in as like maybe the office that I work at, right? And so maybe we'll put in the World Trade Center. So now what I can do is when I right click on this, it's going to open up two tabs. It's going to open up that first one for the actual place, and then it's also going to open up those directions over to maybe what my commute would look like or any other thing. So that's really great. So now I have a very quick way to quickly find the information about those things. And so kind of what are some of the other fun things that I added to this as part of my apartment search was actually also I actually added the Yelp reviews to that one as well to see if there was any reviews about the company that managed the building, as well as in the United States, we have sort of business sites around sort of if there are customer complaints about a particular place as well, running those searches. And so it's a great way to run a lot of, grab a lot of relevant information very quickly. Any questions on that one?
Not particularly that one, but we have some from the chat, if you're okay with that.
Yeah,
we have Reyes. Hey, Reyes, thanks for joining. Reyes asks, do we have pre-built blocks to start a UiPath bot?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So if you search for UiPath and also in the marketplace, there's one for running a UiPath process. So this would be running it via Orchestrator. There's also one for adding things to a UiPath queue. running a local UiPath process would be if you had their local attended bot installed on your desktop. You can do that, as well as UiPath apps as well. Oh, sorry, this is a context menu, so I can't embed a UiPath app, but I can show that later.
Cool.
Yeah, so and kind of the other thing as well that I'll show is you can make any API calls you want, and so you can actually, because UiPath and Automation Anywhere have some great great APIs, you can actually really do any sort of actions that you might want to do to interact with your orchestrator or control room instance. But yeah, we also maintain those pre-made bricks as well for that.
Cool. And we have another question, and thanks for all the questions. Keep them coming. That will make a great session. And Ebenezer, thanks for joining. Asks, since PixieBrix is open source, do you offer a rebrand or white label service if it's required by our company?
We don't currently offer a white labeled approach. What we do offer is, so the way that PixieBrix works is we have the open source browser extension, and then we also have kind of our version of orchestrator or control room that's currently closed source. And so what we do offer though is to companies that will actually provide ways to co-brand the extension so that you can get your company logo there or other things as well.
Cool. And so, and what for those of us who doesn't quite understand the question, what does that mean that you could a rebrand or white label service? What is that?
Yeah, that would be typically that they would kind of take our code and then they would create their own version of the extension that they would put into the Chrome Web Store, automatically roll out within their company. So you wouldn't see, for example, the PixieBrix logo or the PixieBrix brand up here. Instead, it would say, trying to think company names like Amazon or Walmart or Alibaba or something up there instead of the PixieBrix.
Yeah, cool.
And so what we can offer is ways to get that co-branding there, but just so that we can move fast with extension development, and we do releases every week, is kind of have a single Chrome Web Store kind of entry that we maintain so that we can move as fast as possible on improvements.
Cool, thank you for the answer, and we can go ahead.
Great. So the next one I'll show off is something that we use a lot at our company, which is kind of sending things, is collaboration with the team in terms of sending off whenever we find something cool online or learn something new. We like to let our team know about, hey, I just learned something new in a Today I Learned channel on Slack. And so what I'll show is how you can use PixieBrix to quickly collaborate with your other team members by sending things off to another service like Slack or GChat or Microsoft Teams. And so in this case, I'll kind of just use YouTube as an example here. So let's say if I'm learning some great stuff on this channel, what I can do is I could use the context menu for this, or I could add a button to YouTube. But in this case, what I'll use is our quick bar.
And maybe you could repeat, what is the context menu and how do we activate that?
Yeah, so the context menu is what we built in the last one, where it's whenever you right-click on some text or whenever you right-click on elements on the page, depending on what you've clicked on, whether you've clicked on text or you've clicked on kind of nothing, or you've clicked on an image or you've clicked on a link, those are different contexts, where with PixieBrix you can set up different menu items to appear based on sort of what you've right-clicked on the page. Whereas with the quick bar, instead of right-clicking on things, what you'll do is, so the first time that you want to use the quick bar, you'll get a link to actually configure it in Chrome. And so can jump over to the PixieBrix part in here. And so I can actually type in a shortcut. So in this case, I like to use Command K since I'm on a Mac. But what I do is, from here, on any page, once I set that up, I can hit Command K, and then I get a series of actions that I can perform on that page. And so instead of having this sort of right-click interaction where I have to, which can actually, it's good for kind of one or two different actions on a given page, but once you have a lot of different actions, it gets quite cluttered. And so we introduced the quick bar where I can pull it up on any page. And so in this case, I can already see sort of my action here that I'm starting to configure. And so I can always put an icon with that. So in this case, though, kind of like the last one, this one is actually useful for all different sites. And so I'll actually enable this to run on everything, as well as kind of the same thing as before, where I only want PixieBrix to have access to the page once I actually trigger the action. And so in this case, what I'll do is post a today I learned to our Slack. And so right now what I have is I have an action, and so I can always go up and run this action. I can trigger it, I can search for it, I can trigger it really quickly. And so in this case, what I'll do is I'll first build this one using our built-in kind of Slack message. And so the way that the Slack integration works is you would need to configure Slack to kind of which workspace you want to send to. And so the way that you would do this is you would go, so what we need to do is, for this particular one, you need to open up our admin console, which is kind of that control room or orchestrator, just because the way that Slack works and the way that their API works, it works through that OAuth flow that you're familiar with probably, where if I go and I find Slack and click on Slack, it's going to take me through sort of, okay, PixieBrix is requesting actions permission. In this case, I see a couple logos that are very similar just because it's the same logo in this case. What I've done is I've actually connected this to our community Slack. And so that's also a place where we've set up a channel where if you want to try this out, that you can follow along. So in this case, I'll click allow. And so I have here this one personal integration for the PixieBrix community, and it's this Slack integration. And so what I'm going to do is, so once I have that set up, if I jump over to the tab that I was on, open this one. Actually reload the page. Sorry, when I connected that, it rebooted PixieBrix to reconnect things.
There's a lot of nice videos out to the right, I can see.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of good content to post on the Today I Learned channel. So in this case, what I'll do, get back to my post this. So if I want to send a Slack message, you can see here that my Slack integration is coming up that I configured in the other place. And then I have opportunities to post the text as well as post some information about which channel I want to send to. So in this case, what I'll do is I'm actually just going to grab the URL. And then using text templating, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, sorry, I can't talk and type, but kind of put in the message as well as the URL of the page that I found things on. And then on this channel, so if I hop over here, we have this webhooks channel set up for you to test things on.
And can we, or the viewer, can we use that channel?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. That's a great spot for you to test out any of the Slack integrations that you want to do. And so now when I do this and I do post today I learned, I just heard the Slack notification, I jump over here, and now I have this Slack message into this channel that says, hey, this was a very useful video. And so the other cool thing that we do at our company for, because we actually use this sort of approach a lot, is we also will collect some additional information from the user when they say, hey, I found this interesting piece of information. Because right now, right, this part here is hard-coded. So what I'll do is actually show a form that's going to collect some additional information about my notes of what I found useful on that page.
So the user that actually say, this is something I learned today, he or she can add a personal note to that link, or is that?
Yep. And so in this case, I'll go ahead and add this. And now we have, this is what we call our form builder here. And so I can kind of give it a title as well as it has an example field in here. So I can say, I'll call this the notes. And so the name is the variable name that will be coming off of this form. And then the label is what you see in terms of the field label. So I can say, what did I learn today? Let's kind of leave this one off. I don't need a description. And then we have different input types. So things like paragraph text or an email or a website URL, those are all going to do different validation as well as dropdowns. So in this case, what I'll do is kind of do a paragraph text. I can say that it's required. So now if I trigger this, right, it's going to actually pop up my form of what I learned today. And then I can actually go ahead and wire this up. So kind of do this, and then here are my notes. Or go ahead and type this in. So now when I check this, right, I get my notes from that form. And so the form's also a great way to configure different things on how you want stuff to behave. So for example, right now I have the channel hard-coded, but maybe what I want to do is I want to add another field where, let's call this the channel. And so I can make this a drop-down where I have things like the webhooks channel, and then also the, maybe if we had like the Today I Learned channel in that case, right? So now I have a form that actually has the channel as well. And then kind of the other fun thing as well is starting to get into like a little bit of conditional execution, where oftentimes with these Today I Learned stuff, I actually want to also save it off to like maybe my personal notebook, or like maybe to Notion, or like maybe to a different place where I like to keep track of what I learned. So the tool that I use for keeping track of what I learned is I actually send everything off to a Mac application called Drafts. And so what's interesting about Drafts is it's actually a desktop application, but because it has support for what's called URL schemes, if I put in a special URL in Chrome, it'll actually call that app with that information. You can actually automate a lot of desktop apps as well using PixieBrix. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new draft, and then here, I'll just kind of put in my, just for kind of moving quickly, I'll put in my notes. And then what I'll do is I will add another field here that says, do I want to save this in my notebook or not? And this one will go ahead and we'll make this our checkbox. So now what I have is a form that when I post this, it's going to have what did I learn, what channel do I want to post it to, and do I want to save this in my notebook? And so with PixieBrix, there's this condition field here. And so the condition field, you can see when I click into it, it's actually in this text mode. What I'm actually going to do in this case is kind of paste in the variable, or type in the variable name. So I want form.save. And so since that's already sort of a true or false value, I can just put that directly into the condition. And so in this case, this brick is only going to run if that condition is met. And so I'll go ahead, do post Today I Learned, send this off to webhooks, and then I'll do save in notebook. And so now you can see here, it opens up my desktop application with the content that came off from there. And so you can see that there's a lot of like rich things you can do in terms of using us for collaboration, as well as triggering different parts of the workflow based on those conditions. And so those might be based on things that the user selected in the form, or they might also just be based on things like context that you got from the page. So for example, maybe you want to have a rule that only things from YouTube get posted into the notebook, right? Or maybe things from YouTube get sent to one channel versus things from another learning source get sent to a different channel. And so you have like a lot of control over, really over that user experience that you have on any site. And so again, kind of the fun one about this is because it's a click bar and I've set it on every site, now this will actually work, once I save this will actually work on any web page that I'm on. So if I come over here, I actually have the post of Today I Learned on this page as well. And so it becomes a really powerful tool on building up that library of different actions that you can take on any page.
And how easy is it to share across teams? Like say that we're only 2 here at my team, but say we were 10 or something like that. Would that be easy to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that sharing works in PixieBrix is, if I hop over to the options page here, I can see all of the different things that I have active here. And then there's just a share button. And so if I have, so in this case, so the first time that you want to share things, PixieBrix will ask you to set up just what we call an account alias, which is just sort of a unique identifier for your account for when you share across teams or if you share publicly in our marketplace. And so you can see here what it's going to do is it's going to open up the share dialog of sort of what is the unique name for this brick. So every single blueprint or extension gets a unique name that identifies it in the marketplace or in your team marketplace, as well as do you want to share it with the public, or in this case, I've set up just like a demo team account for ourselves. And so all I need to do is toggle this on, and now this will actually be available to my team in our team marketplace. And so when I go to my blueprints, I get to see all of the different things that are available to me, either through my team or personal things that I've created and converted into these what we call blueprints.
So my team is here. That was Acme. That was my team name here.
Yeah, that was the team name that I created for the demo. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that was the company name of like Looney Tunes and a bunch of old cartoons.
Yeah.
So what's really powerful about PixieBrix is you can do that. You can share with your team, and then the way that enterprises use us. So like, let's say you create something cool and you want to share it with 5,000 people. PixieBrix actually, on our business plan, actually has the ability to allocate different website enhancements to automatically roll out to different groups of users at the company. And so you might roll out one set of enhancements to the human resources team, one set of enhancements to the recruiting team or the sales team or the IT team or the RPA team might have their own set of enhancements. And so you can roll things out to different groups automatically so that people don't have to kind of come in and grab the things that they want themselves.
Cool. And if I can add a little thing here, if you want to create the same flow that Todd did with Slack, if you want to create that with Microsoft Teams, I created a nice video, Todd. You can't see it here, but I will drag it in here. This one combines PixieBrix and Teams, and you can easily just recreate it by following the video. And back to you, Todd.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that's a send to Microsoft Teams brick. It's a very similar flow.
Yeah, it's almost the same that I created there. I think I copied your guide, in fact. But
perfect. Great. Yeah, and that's kind of a good thing to point out is we do have a lot of guides on docs.pixiebrix.com. If you go to tutorials, there's a lot of different tutorials here. So things like exporting a table, so like automatically scraping a table and exporting it to a CSV file, things like that. And so they're also tagged by kind of what are the different things in terms of how short are they, what different features are they using. So that's also a great resource as well. So kind of the final thing I'll show is we've really been talking about kind of triggering different actions and sending them off to different places and using conditional logic. The other cool way to use PixieBrix is what we call as a heads-up display, where on a given page that you can actually pull in additional context into that page, so you don't have to jump somewhere else to kind of find information. So in this case, so I will encourage everyone to click the star button on the PixieBrix extension project, but in this case, I'll actually hop over to a different repository for this one. So one of the common things that kind of comes up for when I'm using GitHub or using different sites is I kind of want to pull in additional information about sort of where has this project been talked about online, where can I find additional information on it, things like that. And so that's a perfect use case for PixieBrix's kind of more heads-up display functionality, right? So one of the things that I showed, right, is this sidebar here, where on any page you can add different panels that will appear when you're on that page, or you can actually create them to appear on any page if you wanted to. And so the way that I add content to that is I'll go here to this ad and I'll click on sidebar panel. And so I get this panel here. The first time you do it, it says, okay, there's nothing to show here because there's no renderer attached to it. And so PixieBrix has a different series of kind of what we call renderers of things to show information. So like one of those is I can render Markdown. And so in here, if you know Markdown, kind of say, hello. I can do multi-line stuff in there. I can do lists. Render that as well. I can also, one of the more powerful things you can do with PixieBrix, right, is I can embed an iframe into any page, and that URL can be based on the context of the page. So one of the fun ones that I actually do for GitHub on our repository is I'll actually grab the status page for it and then plop that in. And so whenever I'm on GitHub, I actually, whenever I open up this side panel, I can actually just see what is the current service status for GitHub. So in case like some of our continuous integration or other things are failing, I can actually just see what is the current status of the page without having to jump over to their status page. But what I'll actually show is, let's remove that one. And so you can add kind of those panels that take up the whole side. But one thing that we added in January is what we call our document builder, where if I do this render document, now what I have is actually a flexible place where I can drop any sort of element into the sidebar and create like a more rich interactive experience in this sidebar. And so here, if I wanted to, I could, so if I want to add a brick here, I can use this, and then I go ahead and add block. And this defaults to Markdown, so if I wanted to do something here, I can do sort of start getting that Markdown there. I can actually always change this over to the iframe if I wanted to embed an iframe in here, or we have pre-made ones for embedding like Power BI dashboards, which take care of like some of the wiring in terms of what that URL should look like. So in this case, if I wanted to like kind of drop that iframe in there, I can grab the URL there. And now that iframe is getting embedded in the sidebar panel. I can always like change the height of that if I wanted to, so to force it to be taller.
And what are you using that embed for?
The embed is for if I wanted to embed like other sites in here. So for example, this often comes up with like form builders, or if I wanted to embed like the weather or other information where it's some other site actually has a user interface that I like. And so I just want to drop that user interface closer to the page that I'm on so I don't have to switch over to that site.
So to combine them and make them more useful?
Yeah, exactly. Where it's maybe I need this information only like some of the time or like in certain situations. And so I put it in the side panel because I don't want it to always be visible and I don't want to have to like jump over to that bookmark. Or in cases, I can actually dynamically set what this URL is. And so what I can do is, kind of a fun one is maybe pull up the relevant documentation for the site I'm on, or other pieces like that. But what I'll actually do in this case is we'll go ahead and actually hit an API and then render the results of that API. So in my sidebar panel, let's say, for example, I want to see what is kind of the current chatter about this particular project on a site like Hacker News or like a site like Reddit. If I want to see how people use this repository before, what did people think about it, kind of what is the view about it. So in this case, there's actually a company called Algolia has set up. So Hacker News, if no one's seen it before, is just sort of a page where there's just different kind of tech news articles that people talk about, and there's comments about them. And so you can kind of get a take on how does the tech community view a particular project. And so in this case, what I'll do is, and so I could actually like search here for, we were looking at the Node-RED repository, right? And I can see that there's some people talking about Node-RED. So let's say I don't want to have to jump over there. I just want to see what is the conversation going on about that particular repository without having to jump over there. And so I can use this API, and I'll use this one just because it's a free API. And they actually have some examples here, right? And so one of the examples is all URLs matching this URL. And so what I'll do is I will take this example, and I will use our HTTP GET brick to fetch data from an API, and I'll paste that in. And so I can notice here that there's kind of two parts to this query. There's the query, and then there's also that I want to restrict this to the URL. So in this case, I'll use the parameters here, and I'm going to do multiple different parameters. So this one is the restrict searchable attributes. I'll just hard code this to the URL. And then there's this other one for the query. So I'll take the query, and here's where I need to figure out what query do I want to pass to this API. And so one thing that I might try first is I might try grabbing this URL here, since that's the GitHub URL. And so we'll give this a try first. I'll paste that in. So it's input.url. If I want to try this out, I'll click render panel, and I'll get this error back that says that currently we don't allow hitting unsecure URLs, right? And so the default one from the example was HTTP. So I'll change this to HTTPS, which they also support, and I'll render this. And I can see all the different information that's coming back from that API. So I see that it got 9 hits back. And so each hit kind of has a title and a URL, the number of points that it's received, as well as a relevancy score for the search, and then an object ID, which in this case, the object ID actually refers to the story posting on that news website. So this is great, and so what I can do is I can actually show this in a list in my side panel so that I always have on any repository what is the information there. And so on my render document, what I'll do is I will go ahead and add a list. So I'm just moving the window here. And on the list, I pass in what is the array of items that I want to provide. So in this case, it's the response, and then it's the hits from that response. So if I wanted to, I could always that, and then I give the element key, which is what is the variable that each hit is going to be referred to as within the stuff that I put beneath here in this list. So I'm going to call this the hit, and then the item type. What I'll do in this case is I forgot which thing I was going to build here. So in this case, what I'll do is we can make this text, and so then I have a paragraph of text. I'll go back and actually do this the way that I was originally going to do it in a second with just straight Markdown. And so that's the paragraph text. And so within here, right, each hit has a title. And so let me grab the hit.title. So now when I render this, I get all of the titles coming off of there. So now I just remember what I was originally going to do in this live build, and so that's kind of the fun parts of live builds. Right?
Yeah.
Is I was actually going to show off kind of just doing the Markdown and kind of using the looping infrastructure in the Markdown itself. So let me go ahead and remove this, and let me go ahead and add the Markdown here. And so the language that we use for these text templates, and so I'm in text mode right now, and so I can enter in plain text, or I can also write a template. So we use the JavaScript library is called Nunjux, but if you've ever used Python and Django, there's the Jinja framework in Python. A lot of frameworks have very, very similar ones with the exact same syntax. And so you can actually, I think in previous ones we saw sort of the variable and then also the hard-coded values, but there's also a whole way to do things like looping as well as conditional logic as well in these text templates. So in this case, I'm going to do a loop. And so I'm going to say for hit in response.
Do you need to have some sort of a coding experience to use PixieBrix, you think?
It definitely helps if you want to do more complicated logic, so things like looping, things like the conditional logic. But what we see a lot of people do is they start building the simple things, and then if they do have questions for the conditions, they reach out to a team member. I think one of the things that we're focused on building over the next couple of months is actually sort of for basic logic. And you saw like this list that I just put together, right, that didn't really involve actually like the control flow logic. It's just here, add a list to this page. Adding things like that, as well as adding easier ways for doing conditionals without having to write code.
Cool.
So in this case, what I'll do is I'll create a loop. And then inside of this loop, I'll do a list item, since this is Markdown that I can write in here. And so I would grab like the title for each one of these. And so let's get in the syntax right here. So now I'm getting a bunch of list items. Interesting. That is interesting that. I'm definitely getting one for each hit. Why isn't that? Oh, now I see. Okay. So what's interesting here is, so this is sort of one of the things where I'm in template land. I'm not in PixieBrix land when I'm working inside of this Markdown book. And so in this for loop, this hit actually doesn't have the @ sign in front of it. So the @ sign is all the things that are coming off of the bricks. Whereas when I'm working in sort of a template loop, it's just going to be this direct one here. So if I render this, now I have a list of all of the different things in here. And so again, I can use that Markdown syntax. And so I could put the title, and then I can grab the URL for things. And so if I go back to the Hacker News site, I can kind of see what is the structure of a URL on that site, right? So it's kind of this item, then its ID, and then the ID number for that item. So I'm going to grab that, I'm going to paste that in here, and then I just need to figure out kind of what is that variable name for that item. So in this case, if I go back to hits, you can see that it's that object ID there. And so I can just put in the object ID. So now I can render that. So now I have a list of all the different things coming off of that API for that particular URL. And so that's pretty cool, right? I can go ahead and save that. And then if I go find a different project, I'm trying to think of, I think there's other automation tools. It's like this one here, right? I can always open that up, and then I can see the different comments that are coming off of there. And then, it's like if I look up PixieBrix, I don't think we've actually ever submitted to Hacker News. So if I come here, right, there's no results there. So feel free also to submit us to Hacker News if you want.
And you managed to fix the error very quickly in this live build. That's always a sweat.
Yeah, and so the other fun thing with these panels is actually you can also trigger actions from them as well. So in this case, I'll go back to my panel here, right? And so I have this API request, and I have render document. The other thing I find myself doing a lot on GitHub repos is they're pretty inconsistent in showing where is the link to the package on like npm or like the other package repository where like you would actually go to install it. And so often I have to, sometimes the documentation is good and it says like what is the actual package name for you to install, but it takes some looking, right? So one of the things that I like to do is I'll go ahead and add a row here. Move this one up.
And let's be honest with us, Todd, as a PixieBrix user, how much do you use it per day, you will say? Like to improve your own productivity.
I use it a lot. I think there's a lot of things where I manually trigger things like through the quick bar. So like I use getting things done as a productivity system. And so if I want to send tasks to my task management system, I either send it to drafts like I showed earlier, or I also use OmniFocus for that. And then also like for things like, we use it a lot on our team. So like the sending Slack nudges. So we actually add buttons to GitHub to say like, I'm looking at this pull request, or I've started working on this issue. And so there's a lot that we use throughout the day. Also like giving kudos to people on the team when they do something cool. So there's a lot that we do there. And then also there's a lot of like ambient things. So like the thing that I didn't show in this section, in this session are things like triggers that can automatically run on page load. And so like hiding certain things that I don't care about on the page. And so there's a lot of things where I don't necessarily interact with it, but it's also just taking care of things passively for me as I use a particular site.
Cool.
And so it's kind of hard to say because there's just so much of it, and I think those are like kind of the most fun sort of interactions where you're not necessarily even having to think about using the automation. It just becomes part of that site experience for you. And so it's like another one that I'll add here is, so now I have a button here, right? So if I render this, I get a button. And so maybe I want to open this on NPM. And so on that button, I can go ahead and select an action to occur on that. Right now, we just default it to our confetti brick. I think another brick that I like a lot is our sound effect brick. And so you can do things like the magic wand. You probably can't hear it on the live stream, I'm not sure, but so you can do like audio effects, but in this case, I'll just do like an NPM search in a new tab. So I'll do this, and then like our other search ones, right, it has the query, so I'll grab the URL here, click on the button, configure that to be the URL. Now when I search this, it's going to open it. This particular one, their search doesn't actually work great on GitHub links, and so I actually want the repository name, otherwise the search won't be too good. So if I go back to GitHub, if I can find it, what I will do is I'll add another step here where I'm going to actually read the name of the repository. And so I'll choose the selector. And so this one here is just our jQuery reader brick. So in the previous one, I used the React one, which or the component reader, which tries to detect what framework the site is built in, and then automatically grab the components on the page. In this case, I'm just going to use the jQuery one, where what it's going to do is it's just going to give back the text of the component of whatever I've selected for this particular selector. And then so this one, call this like repo name. So now I can change this to, instead of input.url, change this to repo name. So now when I'll render this, then I'll click this. Now it is actually pulling the actual name of the repository, so I get an exact match instead of those bad results that I was getting.
Yeah.
So this is an example when I tend to put a lot of things onto the page just because there's and what's also cool about this is if you wanted to, you can sort of detect kind of what is the most relevant language for the repository, and then I could actually do conditional logic in terms of, do I want to search NPM or do I want to search PyPy, or sort of which package repository do I want to search for this thing. So that's where sort of the fun bits of conditional logic can come in as well.
That looks very, very cool, Todd. And Todd, now we're on to some more non-technical questions, because I will leave the headset and the microphone for my wife. This is the first time she's joining the stream, actually, so she will have a few questions for you if you're ready for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
She will take the main chair.
So hi Todd, I'm sorry I had to leave, almost got suffocated myself, I don't know what happened, didn't want to bother all of you. So I think one thing, and thanks for this really nice demo, I'm not a technical person like Anders and a lot of the viewers. What are your experiences with people kind of actually adapting your technology, because it requires some sort of behavioral change, right? Working in a different way. How do you work with that, and how do you help your users with that?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is about our technology is there's certainly like the experience of creating things, and that takes a particular mindset in terms of what's possible or what would be useful or how would I improve this page. And so there's sort of, we like to show people the art of the possible in terms of these are the different patterns, these are ways that you might want to use it, and then people say, oh, you can do that? Well, let me do that for this particular site or this particular like internal tool that we have at our company or this particular business process. So that's what we like to do in the creation process. And then from like the usage standpoint, like when we deploy at an enterprise or we deploy at a business, we often find what it is there's sort of some maybe they have a development background, or maybe they just like to tinker with things. They'll build things, then they'll share them with their team, and then the team members, they can just activate stuff, and then it's just available to them, and so it becomes just part of the website to them in terms of they don't even necessarily know like which pieces are the pieces that PixieBrix is doing versus which pieces are the piece that are kind of the actual native site. And so even when we think about like our enterprise deployments, where you might have an RPA developer that creates kind of a small enhancement, whether it's kind of giving people an easy way to convert a currency or to raise an issue in Slack to their team lead, or we actually also have in the business context some process excellence cases around like recording the amount of times that a particular action is taken. Enterprises will roll those features out automatically to the users, and then the users, they don't even know necessarily kind of, they just experience it as the native site. And especially a lot of these things, if they're just kind of passively modifying the page or waiting for a particular thing to occur and then popping up a form, it's really just native and seamless. They're not even thinking about kind of the PixieBrix aspect. They're just using the site, but it better fits their business process.
Cool. It makes sense, and I would say as a non-technical person, it seems less dangerous working with PixieBrix than working with UiPath, for example. Anders hates doing all the stuff that I do, but my head explodes when he shows me variables and all sorts of weird stuff in UiPath. So this I would actually I wouldn't mind trying to do something in. It looks really nice, and I can see how I could actually benefit from kind of making my own daily use of a million different browsers and systems a lot more efficient. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's definitely something where we still sort of, you're going to have the most success if you do have kind of like you're not afraid of variables and you're not afraid of opening up kind of the dev tools. But over time, that's really a goal of ours, is just how do we make this as approachable to people as possible. And so even when we think about things like our marketplace, if I hop over to the marketplace, we actually also have a bunch of pre-made extensions in here. So we call them blueprints, because they might actually have multiple extensions in there. So let's say, for example, that like I'm doing research or I'm going shopping, right? What I can do is I can actually just click activate, and it will pop into, well, let's go ahead and activate this blueprint that actually has a few things that I could activate. So either search Amazon, search books on Amazon, search Amazon Video, activate this. And now on any page, like let's say if I want to like learn about Node-RED, I don't know if there's any books on Amazon about Node-RED, but now I have these Amazon context menus. But then and actually, yeah, there's actually some books on here about doing things with Node-RED, but it's sort of what's cool about this also is you can start with those pre-made things, open them up, and then tweak them. And so you can start with things that the people have sort of done all the business wiring, but then you open up and you just change the parts that you're comfortable with. Yeah. And so even things like I think a good example of, if I go back to the marketplace, it's like we have ones for like the posting to Jira, for example, right? From any page. And so and I guess I don't have it configured, but what that one does is often when we build these sort of pre-made blueprints, this one will pop up a form and ask you sort of which channel do you want to send to or which board, and then it will go off and create the ticket. But what you can do is you can sort of start with one of these more generic blueprints that pops up the form or does these other things, take it, and then remove the parts that you already know exactly what you want to send it off to. Yeah. So remove the things that you don't need, hard code in the values that you want, and then now you have something that's super seamless. And so that's also a pattern that we try to do, which is let's make something that kind of works for everyone, but there's more like clicks involved, and then people can kind of subtract to get to what is the exact experience that they want.
Yeah, exactly. I really agree. And also as a semi-technical in-between kind of person, I sometimes use kind of bricks and blocks like this in tools like PixieBrix to kind of build a prototype before I go to a hardcore developer, because then it's a lot easier for him to understand what it is I actually want. Otherwise, sometimes we end up completely different place than what I was actually trying to get, because I'm too bad at explaining what my problem is. So I think it's a great way of looking at it and giving the more non-technical people an ability to try to build and figure out how to solve their problems.
Yeah, I love that. I think in the RPA space especially, I think because we do have many RPA features like simulating button clicks or other things. A pattern that we think is super cool is use PixieBrix to sort of automate things 80% of the way while you're still trying to figure out exactly what the business process is or like what the full automation needs to be. And so you can sort of, in a very rapid way, prototype automations that still have a human in the loop if it's not going to work 100% of the time. And then once you do figure out all the business logic, that's when you sort of ship it off to do an unattended bot in UiPath or Automation Anywhere or RoboCore or another tool.
Yeah, it's like I always say when people are disappointed with their RPA solution only automating 60% of their process. I would really like to have a 60% self-driving car, so I could sleep for 60% of the time going to somewhere across Denmark early in the morning, instead of being annoyed that I have to drive 40% of the way myself. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think I'll hand over the microphone to Anders again. Or what is he saying?
No, I'll say that Stine will have the pleasure of finishing this video stream. Thanks for being here, Todd, from my part.
And thank you for taking good care of me on the first time here, Todd. It was really nice watching a really cool tool, and I look forward to the coming events for the rest of the week with your colleagues.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and really appreciate the opportunity. And thank you to the people watching the stream for all the great questions.
Yeah.
And looking forward to chatting with everyone in the community Slack.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.